Good morning and welcome to Jew in the City Speaks with your host, Allison Josephs, also known as Jew in the City. We use social media. We've been using social media since the founding of our organization. And let me just state right now that I feel like people on the podcast may not know about the organization and people in the organization may not know about the podcast. So let me just say it now to the podcast people. This is not just a podcast. This is actually a nonprofit called Jew in the City. It's a weird name for an organization, I know. It was founded in 2007. I did not have the guts to make it a nonprofit until 2014 because I couldn't imagine fundraising like as something I did every day. I've gotten over it. And so when I founded this organization, which led to this podcast as well, it was to sort of combat the continuous negative depiction that we see of Orthodox Jews in media. It was to combat the lack of nuance, the lack of sort of full characters that most characters in TV shows, movies, books have. We see Orthodox characters usually just without personalities, extreme. We see people running from the community, to escape to a much better secular life. Those are sort of the things that we see regularly. What we don't see are people being happy being Orthodox Jews, people being thoughtful, people having, sort of complex relationships to their Judaism, and still finding comfort, wisdom, deciding to stay religious, having challenges in life that other people could relate to. These are all things that I think are lacking in a lot of media. So I took to social media in 2007 to try to do something about that. We've now expanded into something called the JITC Hollywood Bureau. We discovered a few months ago that pretty much every minority has a bureau in Hollywood where they work directly with directors, producers to develop and create all the way to, production and marketing whole characters from their communities. And so we are so excited to be doing this as well. But what's delightful to find out about is people in the Orthodox community in the larger media space, because let's face it, social media is limited unless you have 20 million Instagram or TikTok followers. The reach is limited and the algorithm is shutting off the spigot more and more. And so to have people like Leah Scheier, who is an Orthodox Jew, who was born and raised in Baltimore, works full-time as a pediatrician, a mom to 3 daughters and twin boys, who is also an author writing novels with Orthodox characters. That's pretty cool. Her first novel, Secret Letters, by Hyperion Disney, received a star review from School Library Journal, glowing reviews from Publisher Weekly, Booklist, and Voya. Her second novel, Your Voice Is All I Hear, Source Books, Fire 2015, received a star review from Booklist and praise from SLJ, Voya, and PW. Rules of Rain, Source Books, Fire 2017 was reviewed by Kirkus Booklist and SLJ. Her fourth novel, The Last Words We Said, Simon and Schuster, was released on August 31st, tells the story of Jewish teens in Atlanta and what happens to one of them when one of them disappears and they all blame themselves. Leah, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here.
So being a doctor is cool, being a writer, being published by Simon and Schuster is cool, doing both is pretty awesome, feeling kind of like a slacker right now. So and the truth is that my daughter wants to become a pediatrician. So maybe we can talk about that a little later. But so tell me a little bit. So just, it's awesome all that you're doing. It's not just mom and career, it's mom and 2 careers. But what's your backstory? Where did you grow up? How did you grow up? Kind of what's your Jewish story?
So I grew up in Baltimore. I was born and bred in Baltimore. I lived there for 33 years. My parents are Russian Jewish immigrants, and they sent me out to Beis Yaakov when I was in kindergarten. I was not raised, in my family, I was not raised traditionally Orthodox, so they were more traditional, but they wanted me to have a Jewish education. And at the time, Beis Yaakov, which is an ultra-Orthodox school, was the one that would give the Russian immigrants a scholarship. So I started off in Beis Yaakov, and I never felt I never really fully fit in because my parents were not actually Orthodox. So we did one thing on Shabbat, and whereas I learned something else in school, which is a little bit confusing. And in the end, I was friends with one other Russian immigrant young girl, and when she was moving to public school, I basically said to my parents, I think we need to switch schools. So they moved me to Beth Tefillah, which was closer in terms of observance to where we were holding at the time. And I attended Beth Phila until 11th grade, and then I moved to more School for the Arts. And then I decided I'd wanted to be a children's author since I was very, very young, since I learned to read, really. But when it came time to make a choice in career, I was pretty much convinced by everyone who I spoke to, and in my own insecurities, that there was no way I was ever going to make this work as a career. So I decided I like people, I like science, and I love working with children. So I thought, pediatrics is the way to go. So I put writing on the back burner for years and years. I went to medical school. I got married. In college, I went to medical school, had my 3 daughters through college, medical school, and residency. And it wasn't until I was finished residency finally that I found, for the first time in my life, between being a mom and a doctor or training doctor, that I actually had time to do something else. So I started.
I'm just gonna be like, wait, what? Okay, residency, mom, and you had time for something else. Okay, I'm gonna balance my hole here now.
It wasn't until I finished residency that I finally
got it after. All right, so
residency, I had barely time to breathe.
Just being a doctor and a mom, you had time for something else. Okay, cool. No, it's fine. They're different. God makes people differently. We're glad that He made you like you. So you had something else. And so how old were your kids? How many kids did you have? This is just also fascinating to me.
I had my oldest daughter when I was in college. I had my second daughter when I was in medical school, and my third daughter when I was in residency. So I graduated all of that with 3 children. And so when I graduated, and I started working part-time in a practice. By that point, we moved down to Atlanta, where my husband was doing his residency. So I found I had time after the kids went to bed, and I wasn't as exhausted as I used to be. So I started writing. I did some fan fiction, and that's actually how my first novel, Secret Letters, got started. I'm a Sherlock Holmes fan, so I thought, I'd like to write a story about what would it be like if Sherlock Holmes had a daughter. So that's where that came from. I wrote that book over a course of about a year and a half, 2 years. And I never thought that I would do anything with it, except my husband said, look, you've spent so much of your time. Why don't you try to get it published? So I told myself, you know what, I'm going to query 30 agents, see what happens. And if it doesn't go anywhere, that's okay. I never really intended it for anything except something to do on the side to enjoy. So I queried, and I was lucky. I had an agent who was interested, and then she sold it to Disney, Hyperion, which was amazing. It was like the greatest thing that ever happened.
Just want to back up for 1 second. So in the middle of Beth Phila, you became like Shomer Shabbos, meaning you come from the not religious home, and then So
my Jewish story is a little bit different. Yeah. So I went to Beth Phila, but I didn't become religious in Beth Phila. I actually went to the School for the Arts, like I said, for high school for the last 2 years. And then when I was in college, I was not particularly religious at all. I was, again, traditional. I didn't really keep kosher, but I still ate at the kosher dining hall more for social reasons. And there was a rabbi, Rabbi Katz, who worked at Johns Hopkins, which is where I was at college, who would invite his students from the kosher dining hall over to his house for Shabbat. And that was the first time I actually, in college, that I really experienced Shabbat as it's meant to be experienced, I guess that's the way to put it, like real a Shomer Shabbat household. And it really spoke to me. It was an amazing experience. And I decided that's how I wanted to raise my family. So I decided to become observant actually in college.
Beautiful.
Yeah. So
back to the book. So your first book, Sherlock Holmes' daughter, I'm imagining she's not Orthodox. She's Sherlock Holmes' daughter, right?
So actually when I started writing, after I wrote my first novel, and even like to some degree, even my second novel, which did have Jewish characters, I had people asking me, are you going to write about Jewish people? Are you going to, write about your community or anything? And my answer was always no, actually, at first. I was always very nervous about tackling that. For the simple reason that I think that it's really important when an author writes that she be objective. I don't like it when I read a novel and it's really obvious to me through the novel what the author's political or religious or whatever agenda that she's speaking through the characters in order to tell you what she thinks is the right way to go. And I was worried that I had I grew up traditional, but then I became Orthodox, that I wouldn't really be able to kind of parse my own complicated feelings about my religion and then be able to portray characters within my community in an objective and completely non-judgmental way. I was worried that I wouldn't be able to do that. And it was also just such a personal thing for me. So I thought, you know what, I'm just going to write in my second novel, Your Voice Is All I Hear. My characters are Jewish, but the Judaism isn't a huge part of it. It's a very small part. As I kind of dip my foot in that water, but that was as far as I was willing to go. My third novel, Rules of Rain, didn't have Jewish characters. And it wasn't until this last novel, The Last Words We Said, that I decided, to go all in. I wrote about my community, which I live in a modern Orthodox community now, and I set it in Atlanta, where we moved down to Atlanta when my husband was doing residency. I set it in the modern Orthodox community in Atlanta, that was the community that my daughters grew up in to some degree, and I love that community. It was warm, and I no longer live there, but when I was there, it was a warm, welcoming place, and so I was excited to set my novel there, because I wanted to show the modern the Orthodox community for what it is. It's a warm and loving place. It's a wonderful community.
I can't help but notice, not to talk about a different project, but I can't help but notice that there was another major, piece of media that came out this summer that also included Atlanta, My Orthodox Life. The main character has her time in Atlanta, and it's so interesting to sort of have different takes on, sort of a warm recollection and showing of a community versus, they gave me no voice, they controlled women, they degrade their women. So I hadn't even sort of connected that until right now, but that's really amazing that you're kind of giving Atlanta Orthodoxy another chance in mainstream media to have, a different perspective, seen of it. What kind of feedback have you gotten from the book?
Starting with Jewish readers, it's been wonderful. I've had people writing. This is the first time I saw myself and my friends. The people you write about them. I had a friend who frummed out the way my character Deanie frums out. I had, I was Ray. I was, it's even just the fact that the cover of the book has a boy with a kippah on the cover. In young adult literature, I've never seen that. That's never happened before, as far as I'm aware, not in traditionally published young adult anyway. That was really exciting to me to hear people's reactions. Like this is the first time, and people were so thrilled that it isn't a novel about wanting to throw off your Judaism and therefore find freedom, just like you mentioned in the beginning of your podcast. It's not, it's not about that. Each of my characters has a complicated relationship with their religion, but it's based on love. Even the one that's rebelling, I have one character who's rebelling. She still loves and respects her family and doesn't want to hurt anybody in the process. She's not angry at the religion. She's just trying to figure out who she is and where she belongs. And it's just as an example, they're having a discussion about Yom Kippur, and her, she had declared earlier that she's an atheist, and her friends basically say, like, you're an atheist, why are you fasting? Are you fasting? And she goes, yeah, I may be an atheist, but of course I still fast on Yom Kippur. I mean, these are people that I knew, like, right. That was the reaction, like, yeah, obviously, like,
And what about non-Jewish readers? Any feedback from them?
So mostly the reaction I've gotten from non-Jewish readers is, I didn't know these people existed. Not, not in an other sense, but like, right. I didn't know this community existed. I didn't know, I actually didn't know very much about Jews at all. It was wonderful learning about traditions and the things that they do throughout the novel. It's just part of their daily life. They're like, I don't spend a tremendous amount of time, discussing the minutiae of kashrut, because my readers don't, either religious or non-religious, don't want to read about that. Yep. They just want to know how the biggest part that I do discuss in the book is, because this is a book about teens, is about being shomer negia, which is a huge conflict in a growing teen's life, especially in modern Orthodox teens. With ultra-Orthodox teens, it's a little bit more it's a little bit more, I guess, black and white, like what you can do, what you can't do. With modern Orthodoxy, is a little bit of fluidity there. So you have teens who are completely shonagir, and you have teens who aren't at all. And that kind of struggle and trying to figure out what is best for you and how you want to live your life is kind of front and center in the novel. It's actually one of the biggest themes. That's the aspect that I thought would appeal to teens that have never been religious at all in their lives, because it's a very real struggle even for non-religious people as well.
How they handle that sort of emerging part of themselves.
Exactly.
Do you think your success by getting published through non-Jewish themes sort of opened up the door for something so Orthodox? Meaning, this had been your first novel. Do you think a house like Simon and Schuster would have been like, oh, we'll take this right away? Or because you already had proven yourself as a writer that could write, that could get published, that they could now? Do you see my question? Like,
I hear your question. It's a good question, and I actually don't know the answer. I think typically publishing houses will pick up an author if they think that, they'll pick up pretty much anything by an author if their previous works have flown off the shelves. That wasn't the case with me. My previous 3 novels did okay, but they weren't bestsellers. Yep. So I don't think that I was published based on my success with those novels. I'll also mention there's an upcoming novel being represented by my agent Rena. There's an upcoming novel with a boy with a black hat and tzitzit on the cover, which is very exciting. It's coming out next year from Penguin, which is another big house.
And he stays religious, or you can't know the ending, or
I don't know. I haven't read the book. It's not out yet, but I told my agent that I need to have an advanced copy as soon as possible. It's called The Life and Crimes of Hudi Rosen. It sounds very interesting. I'm very excited about it. But it's his first novel. So he got published by Penguin. I think that's a better, I guess, answer. I'm not sure how it worked for me, but he got published by Penguin as his first novel, and his novel has a black hat and tzitzit on the cover. So that's, we're making progress.
So if you know someone that solves crimes in a black hat, that would be very cool. That would also be.
I'm not even sure if that's what he does, to be honest with you. I think it's just the title.
Now I have a book idea.
Yeah, absolutely.
Do you think has there been anything that has prevented this from happening before, in terms of, do you think that sort of the publishing world wasn't ready for this? Has the Orthodox community not put out enough attempts? Like, do you have a sense of sort of like what's been the holdup for this being sort of a first moment?
I think you're right in it's time, meaning that there's been a push, obviously, recently for more diversity in literature. If you look at books, let's say 10 years ago, the vast majority were about white protagonists, living in suburbia or something like that. That was the vast majority. Now, in the last 10 years, especially in the last 5 or 6 years, there's been a push for more people of color, diverse sexuality, and also I've seen many in the last 2 or 3 years of Muslim authors writing in for YA audiences, and the covers feature young girls with hijabs. And that those have done, as far as I'm aware, have done quite well, and people are excited. Young people are excited to read about religions, other religions, and other lifestyles.
I appreciate that, because Jews don't always get classified in the minority diversity category. So
exactly.
It's sort of like,
and that's why I said it's time. Yeah. Even though, in my view, Jews are probably one of the most minorities of minorities. They've been,
literally,
you know what I mean?
And coming from a family that went through the Russia experience, being Jewish, it's not even this distant memory. It's like, it's part of your, family story. And yet, so, I don't know, somehow something has been forgotten or rewritten or conveniently forgotten. And in terms of just adult novels, there have been other, authors in the past in this space, like Faye Kellerman comes to mind. She has Orthodox characters. Have you followed any of the other kind of Orthodox characters in, sort of the larger novel space?
I read some Naomi Reagan when I, maybe about 10, 15 years ago. I read quite a lot of her novels. She has kind of a niche market in that way. Otherwise, Orthodox characters in terms of young adult, I don't know of any, except for maybe you could say The Chosen was one. And other than that, I'm not aware of any. Mostly my impression of Orthodox portrayal in media has been just like what you said on Orthodox, and in my unorthodox life. I've watched Unorthodox. I did not watch my unorthodox life. I read a lot of things that I felt that sounded like it was not quite exactly what I wanted.
You filled your head with medical terms and things to save life. You do not need to fill your head with this garbage. It was I didn't hear the best reviews from that, so that's why I kind of stayed away. I really enjoyed Stiesel. I don't know if you've watched that. I think that's a fantastic portrayal. It's that's the difference between a movie or a series done with love versus one that's done to other community, which is what I felt. I'll be honest, I enjoyed portions of Unorthodox. I especially love the actress. I think she's a phenomenal actress. And I don't mind if that kind of story is told, as long as it's not the only one out there. Correct. And so far, it's really the only one out there. So look, our organization works with ex-Hasidic Jews, people that have gone through all sorts of traumatic and dysfunctional experiences. So I know people who say that the, traumatic moments that they saw in that series were personally triggering because they lived through things like that themselves. But at this point, working with this community for about half a dozen years, I feel very strongly that these are the most dysfunctional and, abusive cases that exist there. The happy people are not making stories about. And so that's, a fair thing to discuss and explore in, media and literature. The question is, are you framing that as normative Hasidim, or are you showing that this, these are the most dysfunctional cases, and every community has its most dysfunctional cases? And if this is all you know about Hasidic Jews, just the miserable ones that abuse each other, then sort of how do you have a full picture? So I think that's my frustration. Not that these stories should never be told, because, we share the stories of our members too, but we also share that sort of aha moment when they discover that being a Jew is beautiful and that there's wonderful Orthodox Jews and Jews in the world. It's just that when you're with, people with personality disorders and toxic people, they just have a way of ruining life, just any life, any community, any society. We kind of skipped a question that I was going to ask before, which is, why did you finally decide to visit this storyline that you were afraid to go to before? How did you get over that fear or concern of the bias you might bring to it?
So my first, whenever I come up with an idea for a novel, it's always centered around something that I'm excited about or passionate about, or something that just some idea that I can't stop thinking about. Like, for instance, with Your Voice Is All I Hear, was about a teenager who her first boyfriend is diagnosed with schizophrenia, and mental illness has always been something that I've been really interested in. In the case of The Last Words We Said, my first thought, the germ of the idea was, what would it feel like if the person that you loved was gone but missing, and you weren't sure what had happened, and yet you blamed yourself. That was it. That was the idea. And then once you have that idea, you go, and this is my process anyway. I decide, okay, who are these people? Where do they live? What motivates them, et cetera, et cetera. And I didn't so much decide to set it in modern Orthodox community in Atlanta. It was just kind of, it happened almost naturally. My characters, it's gonna sound a little weird, but my characters start talking to me when I start to envision them. I start seeing scenes the way that you see a scene in a movie. I would see it playing out, and all of these characters, especially my character Ray, just had these really loud voices, and they had all these things they wanted to say, and that they were, when they were talking to each other. And I realized as I was listening to them that even though they all had different approaches to their Judaism, I loved each and every one of them. And I didn't feel one was right, one was wrong, this was the path you should take. I didn't feel in any way judgmental about anything that was going on, because I understood what was motivating everybody. So I decided myself, you know what, I am ready to write this now. I'm not coming to it from a biased perspective. I'm coming to it with love. I'm coming to, number one, to the community with love, and more importantly, even to each of these characters, even with their very different choices that they make. I understand and I love each one of them. So I think that that's why I felt suddenly ready, because I could hear them, and I didn't, and I loved all of them.
I love it. In terms of like where the motivation comes, if the characters are literally visiting you in your head, then I guess maybe you can be a mother and a doctor and do it all together if the stories are playing out. But there's just such a colorful imagery that you almost can't help but to like create these stories, because sort of I mean, now to sort of, we're actually putting out this video soon, which we filmed a lot of it in Baltimore, Orthodox Jewish artists, partners in creation. And I think sort of that inspiration kind of coming down from above and sort of feeling like, God has kind of put something in you to put out to the world. It sounds like that's exactly what happens to you when a novel sort of comes as an inspiration. Am I right?
It feels a little bit like, I don't know. I don't know if I would say God. It's a lovely way to put it, but it's more just my very overactive imagination.
Right. All right. So that's the more like scientific way. I'm the whole spiritual person here. No, you can certainly. I'm just saying in terms of, yeah. Right. No, you certainly don't have to put God on that.
Braggy to say God gave it.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right. Okay, fine. That God, right. Okay. So God did, speak to you. I hear that. I know what I'm saying is that, does God talk to me? No, it's more like, I feel like I pray for ideas. I pray for creativity, for wisdom. And when something for a strategy, for the right partners, I pray for these things like constantly. And when something opens up for me that I've prayed for, I don't know that it actually came from God, but for me, at least, it's a feeling of, sort of, I prayed for that and then sort of it came my way. But yes, it's true. We obviously don't know sort of where inspiration strikes from. But that's, I guess, sort of part of what my relationship to God looks like. Remind our readers, name of the book, where they can get it, where they can learn more about you.
So the book is called The Last Words We Said. It's available on Amazon, in Barnes and Noble, and it's in most bookstores. Last time I checked, and you can order it if you're overseas. You can order it on Book Depository, and it's also available on Kindle. So yeah, it's.
Now, for anyone wondering, is this appropriate for Orthodox teenagers? Is there a certain level or age that you would say, meaning, I guess, sort of how adult novels can be very explicit nowadays? So kind of what would be the rating for, someone from a more,
That's a very good question. I would rate it as PG. I can tell you what's in it, if that helps.
Yeah.
There is definitely discussions of loss and grief, and that, so it deals with a missing person. So that in of itself, that's a tough subject.
Sure.
I would say over 14. And then in terms of if you're talking adult situations, nothing ever goes beyond PG, meaning no clothing comes off. There is some kissing, and there is I don't want to say discussion about sex, but it's more just like they discuss it in theory. No one actually discusses actual acts or anything explicit in any way. They just say, he did or didn't, that kind of thing. And there is, at the very end, there is like one use of the F word.
I mean, compared to what's out there today, that sounds like a pretty clean novel. So, I intended
it to be clean. Because
I think it's almost difficult to
I have kids.
Right. Yeah. For Hanukkah, we were looking for young adult novels, and it's almost difficult to find anything that, sort of would be in standards that we would want, our teens to read. So that's another, I would say, value that you're bringing to the community. So thank you so much. This is incredible work that you're doing. I imagine that, God willing, we will see more from you. And it's exciting that we have someone so talented in our community with the capability of representing, telling our stories that haven't been told before. Really nothing short of historic and so overdue. So we want to congratulate you and wish you continued hatzlacha in the future.
So much. Thank you for having me on.
Okay, great. And thank you so much for joining us. You can catch us same time, same place next week. Bye-bye.